Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. How's it going, everybody?
Good morning.
We are back.
Happy Tuesday.
Here we go. Another episode. Any good
Another
openers?
episode.
Things that are happening? Things that are going on?
Lots of things going on, but well, unrelated.
Not Power BI realm. Not Power BI realm.
Right.
We just had Valentine's Day yesterday.
We just had Valentines Day.
Hope everyone was able to have an opportunity to spend some time with people they loved and say hello and
Happy
let them know.
Valentine's Day, gentlemen. Did you guys get large bouquets of flowers, chocolates,
I did not.
beautiful notes?
Well, I think it's been fun when the kids start building you little. I have a heart that my daughter gave me, and it's super cute when they made little things. I have a bracelet. They're like, "What do you want for Valentine's Day?" I was like, "I don't know." I was like, a new car. They're like, "That's something I can do." I'm like, "Okay, a bracelet." So now I have a little bracelet for my daughter that she made for me. So I'm happily.
Here's a giant poster, Dad, that says "Happy Valentine's Day" with hearts on it.
Yeah, those are those melt me.
The transition from kids, it was great. Went quick, picked up some flowers for the wife, but it was like, hey, get some candy for the kids too. Like Happy Valentine's Day.
Anytime the girls come home with M&Ms, that's when I teach them about taxes.
Oh yeah, that's funny. We do the same thing with ice cream too. Kids get ice cream at Culver's, and we say, "All right, it's time for taxes." Dad gets a scoop of that.
Yeah.
There's two things that are certain in life: death and taxes.
Yeah. And this is your first lesson.
Oh goodness.
A
Couple events coming up, Tommy.
Yeah.
I think you're gonna jump in there and say that.
So yeah, we're speaking in Canada, but not in Canada. There's the Global Power Platform Boot Camp. And I'm doing Germany, Belgium, and then Canada all on Saturday. So it's going to be quite the traveling day.
Wow.
And I believe if we're doing questions, it's Q&A, right? So it's kind of like ask me anything with explicit measures.
The Canada Global Power Platform Boot Camp is an AMA with us. So it's literally just episode 84B.
with real-time questions.
With real-time questions.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Promote people, get people to come to Canada, ask us questions. We're going to take everyone's questions.
Come to the Canada site.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, we have no idea if there's a live chat enabled. I have no idea.
We're going to wing it.
We're going to wing it.
I'm sure we'll be just fine.
We did have another live event this Monday morning as well. Yes. Tom, you want to give us a heads up of what that one was?
Yeah, the first Microsoft official Power BI community show was Monday. So they'll be doing that once a week, every Monday.
Yeah.
And they must have loved the podcast so much because they asked Mike and I to talk there on goals.
Yep.
So they're like, Tommy did a okay job with a demo on goals.
Why
don't we get that?
Yeah. They said it was a great job.
Out of the user group, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wish I could do the user group now because since I've done the Microsoft one, I've refined it, aka practiced it.
That's what user groups are for, man. That's what we keep preaching, right?
Yeah.
You go to the user group, you refine something. In this case, you just didn't know you had a presentation that was, going to happen after the case. It's like,
we were your trial run. Figured out what
that's the way
it's
it should be.
amazing how much better it's gotten.
See, you don't want to be on the YouTube channel with thousands of people involved. You just want to refine it in our user group with other thousands of people.
When you realize it's 30 minutes until you have to talk, you just go, "Oh crap!" And then let me pull my browser up, and there I'm prepared for the demo.
There we go. Let's rock and roll.
But the Power BI show is pretty cool. Belinda Allen spoke. We talked to Trev Gatt, who's been doing a lot with goals too, marquee insights.
Yeah,
so that was a lot of fun too.
Yeah. Over the weekend, Tommy and I also recorded a whole bunch of kind of intro videos to goals. So Seth was just asking the question, and we should bring it up now. What's with the seasons, Michael? So on our YouTube channel, we've got season 1, season 2, season 3. The seasons are irrelevant. It's literally nothing. The reason there are seasons is because it's basically topic based. So if you want to learn about Charticulator, that would be season 1. If you want to learn about something else, it's a different season. So we've done one on Deneb, Charticulator, and now goals, which I think is our 4th group of videos, season 4, I guess. So that's what we're trying to do there. Anyways,
we're gonna stop when we get to how many seasons of The Sopranos there were.
Yeah, right. It's just it's gonna just keep going now. I'm trying to narrow the focus on each of these these
Yeah.
season things. I think I have one in me around trying to get out things about tabular editor. I really been talking a lot about tabular editor on the things you can do with it. I think it's a good
Yeah.
point to start doing
Yeah.
demos and showing people how it actually works, and stitching that story
Yeah.
together about how you use it in your daily workflow.
And one last thing, since you just stuck at the stuff, I'm going to stick it to you now on air.
Oh
The
boy.
scorecard worked out great yesterday because I showed to now over 2,000 people that you owe me a cannoli. So me and Mike were chatting before, like, how many people do you think are going to join live? And we did an over under. So
Yeah.
immediately went over. So my scorecard
Well, it
starts
wasn't
off
immediate. It took a little time for it to ramp up. I thought we were
way
going to be under
before
100.
we went on. Yeah. So enough time to make my first goal in my scorecard. Likelihood Mike owes me a cannoli, and I made it 100%.
Oh yeah,
So
no
and
problem.
acted like, wow, what's this, guys? I guess I've completed my, and it was a great demo of goals.
It was. If you look very closely, one of Tommy's scorecard is very aptly named, and he demoed it.
The scorecard name is Watch the Explicit Measures podcast.
It was good
I didn't mention
with
it.
with
Just happened to
description.
be there.
It's
Yeah,
like
but
a little
Tuesday,
Easter egg
Thursday.
in there as well. So hopefully,
That's a great way to put, yeah,
yeah,
Easter egg.
Valentine's
And if we had
Day
a
egg.
black light, it would have my signature.
Yes, it would.
So
It was super fun. It was
that
a lot of fun. People were
yeah.
great. The community really pulled together. I hope to see more of these. I think there could be more community members, experts in the space. Um, Power BI Kids is a really interesting topic that we talked about. I
Yeah.
didn't really know a lot about it, but going through it with the other MVPs and listening to their talking about it, it was really interesting. And I thought, you know, we've talked about this before, like how data is happening, the tools that are becoming more capable. I think about what I do today and how fast it's changing year after year. And then I think about my kids and think about they're going to have a whole different way of experiencing computers and programming things and doing stuff in computers. I mean, already when I was a kid, I had to learn like lines of code if I was going to write stuff down or do coding. Like I remember I had a TI-89 or T85 calculator computer,
Yeah.
thing. That was like my first venture into programming when I started doing some simple programs there. All kinds of programs you could get on that, like Centipede and stuff like that.
Literally, the only reason I ever convinced my parents to buy me one is because it was like the first video game for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Snake, right?
Yep.
Well,
Like
great.
Snake on there.
Yeah.
I could play Snake, and that was literally it.
See, I'm a slightly younger generation from you guys. Though, in order to play my game, I had to use MS-DOS. So like F19 simulator, like I had to type it in, like go to the command line,
Mm-hmm.
and then yeah.
Yep. I remember my
So
dad had bought a Commodore 64, and there was some kind
yeah,
of George of the Jungle game that I remember playing in there. And it was a little cartridge you had to shove into the back of the computer or something like that. It was
yeah.
different
Yeah,
time, different
my
era.
first home
Uh,
computer was like a compact Presario, I think.
Oh
it was
man.
a gateway.
And my
I'm
my
still using
younger
gateways.
brother was the one who basically went full code nerd.
Really?
Like, yeah, he would sit
Just
down
loved it.
and crash that thing all the time. My dad would get so upset.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Well,
beautiful.
I'm wondering with the kids, like how young can you start? Because I asked that because I sent you guys this video, but I brought both my girls, a 5 and 3-year-old, down, and I'm telling one, is that data? And my youngest going, it's not data. I'm like, well, I'm going to focus on the older one.
Yeah.
So clearly this won't be your thing.
Nope. I mean,
So
yeah, exactly. And it's going to be interesting because you always try and get your kids to kind of do something that you were interested in, but sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't. So it's kind of interesting to see who gravitates
oh,
towards what things. Like I definitely
and
have
then
tainted them with Legos. I think that is we have been able to clearly convey my passion for Legos onto my children.
it,
But I'm not sure Power BI is going to transfer so well.
if I'm anything like the teacher my dad was, my girls are going into theater very
Mm,
quickly
gotcha.
and not getting close to Power BI. I digress. All right.
We'll see where it goes. Well, anyways, with that, let's actually talk about our topic for the day. So our topic today is kind of around: are we building the wrong reports? Have we built the wrong report for the wrong application? So I'll kick it off there. Tom, you want to give us kind of an intro? Like, let's talk about wrong reports and maybe it was the wrong audience, maybe it was the right report, wrong audience kind of thing. Yeah. How do we define this? How do you know if a report's been built wrong for the wrong audience? How do you know what's going on there?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're doing this as a full topic because we've had a few that have touched on this, and I think naturally
Yeah.
we talked about report labels, we've talked about simplifying the report, and they both actually led to Are we building the wrong report? So framing a whole discussion around this, I think, is needed because there's a few things to think about when we're talking about what does it mean to be a wrong report
Yeah.
for whom. Like you said, is it the audience? Are we complicating the report too
Yeah.
much? Are there just a few things you could tweak where it becomes the right report? And I think the other problem too that I really want to touch on today and or focus on is how do you know if it's the wrong report? And I think that's the problem. No one's going to come to the author and go, "You built the wrong report."
That's true.
Generally speaking, unless you completely screwed it up. But if you're going through the whole development process, there's not going to be that conversation going, "This is not the wrong report." They're just going to go, "Well, let me export." And so there's a lot of things on what does it mean to be wrong? Why is it wrong? And how can we identify it's wrong? So those are a few things to kind of as we begin our conversation today.
This is a good point because Mark jumps on the chat and he goes, "A report is like a joke." I was like, "Oh boy, where's this going?" If you have to explain it, it hasn't worked. I thought that was really good. Yeah, if you have to explain your report a ton, it's not too intuitive, right? If you have to explain a ton of stuff that's going on there, people don't understand how to use it. Maybe you missed the mark a little bit, or you didn't have enough information in
Well,
it to tell people what it's supposed to do.
I
I
disagree with that.
Really?
I'm I'm interested in where this is going to go because with most of our episodes, I'm pretty sure I know, right? And I'm glad we're talking about it because there there is nuance to a lot of even the same things we say, right? Like
Yeah.
ask right, a lot of prep before we even build a report. Are you asking the right questions? Are you getting the right information so
Yes.
that what you're providing in the report is going to be useful and answer the questions of the end user? And it's really glib to kind of say that kind of stuff, right? It
Yeah.
takes experience to go through that process multiple times. And even when you do, we talk about the other side of this, which is, you know, how do you clarify things for the end user? Like we have all these end users asking questions. They don't understand how to use the report. They don't understand what the scope is or whatnot. And there's there's confusion on this side. And I'm glad we're talking about it because maybe some of our experiences of what we think went sideways, will come to light, or some of our where we think we could refine our process a bit will come out of it. But I'm ultimately really interested in seeing where this one goes.
I think there's a lot of different ways you can. I mean, I think when I look at these things, so kind of talking to Tommy's point, how would you define a report being wrong? I guess that's kind of where you have to kind of start here to begin with.
Yeah.
One perspective I think I would put on this would be just does it get any usage or not? Or does it get usage by the right people, right? If you have a report with not a lot of usage, maybe that's an indication of this is not a report that you're going to use all the time. So I know in like my business, there's a couple of reports inside how I track time and people's hours and who's working on what kind of things. Those reports get used every day. I can see the usage on them. The people that are doing work on projects are showing up. They look at the reports. I can see them every day, jumping in, looking at the hours that they've consumed or built. I feel like it's a really good use of a report. I can actually, built this thing. It has a very specific purpose, and then from there, I can get out almost all the information that I need. I very rarely export things from that report because I have all the data I need inside that singular report. So
We
I think that's just one metric. There's probably other out there, but that's just what
yeah.
I'm looking at initially.
Well, Mike, we've talked about this way back in the day when we were talking about data culture and kind of can you measure it. Usage alone is not a good indication of adoption or a good report by itself.
But agreed.
Because
Yes, by
so
itself, it's not.
because yeah, because and you could have a wrong report or a bad report, but it's the only available source of that data. So that's where people are going to be forced to go. So
But but in
you,
here though, I would even argue though. I mean, in some cases, right? If that's the only way you're exposing your data, I've worked on a lot of APIs that people have or they're connecting to,
yeah,
and they're trying to extract information out of those APIs. It's very challenging to. I mean, it's not challenging. You have to be a little bit more thoughtful on how you get data out when you use an API to get it someplace because it's in some kind of semi-structured or some unstructured format, and it makes it a lot harder for you to stitch together that report. But if there's no one else can get the data from anywhere else,
then they're going to use that one
they're going to
report,
use that one
and then your
report.
usage will be through the roof.
Well, I mean, isn't that what you want with a lot of these other sources too, right? I mean, ideally, if you had to step back and say
Okay.
that's I guess that's what I'm maybe what I'm saying here is if you only have one place to consume the data, people will rely upon that consumption point and it will be valuable, right? If you
Right.
give other people options to connect to the data or get information out, people have other ways of creating kind of their own story around it. And that may, in some cases, that may be totally fine. Again, talking to Matthew Roach's governed versus ungoverned data sets, ungoverned data sets might be totally okay for people to find and use and manipulate the data to find their own stories. In governed data sets, like data sets where people are getting bonused on their salaries,
Yeah.
I think you better have that one very well controlled and people can't make up their own story. I think that better be like very tightly figured out and correct all the time as much as possible. And if there's issues,
Yeah.
fix it.
I think we need to take a step back because I think
Sorry.
we're gonna muddy. No. I think I like where it's going, but I think we're gonna muddy the two definitions if we don't do it now.
Okay. Sure.
Bad and wrong.
Okay.
So
You
are you
say
building
bad and wrong?
or yes, are you because you can have a report that's a poor design, a poor report, but has that
Yeah.
needed data, doesn't mean it's wrong, right? Like so I think we need to define what does it
Okay.
mean to be wrong.
So
And then we
so
can talk about are we building that?
Sure. So are people using it? As what Mike said.
yep.
I guess other ways I define a a report that is built wrong or bad is are end users constantly asking
I like that one.
for things that report shouldn't do or doesn't do?
Yep.
Are they dumping out data and doing more with it? And I would say maybe those are like the wrong.
Yeah. Well, are you saying bad and wrong are the same thing?
Yes.
I would completely disagree with that.
Well, bad meaning like, so let's not muddle the two. I
Right.
agree. These are wrong definitions. That you can
Yeah.
correctly answer the question in a really bad way.
Yeah.
Yes. Correct.
Right.
I'll give you a
We've
pie
talked
chart
ad
every.
nauseum.
I'll give you a pie chart
We're
for every single
experts at
thing you
that.
need.
500 colors and all
Yes.
segments. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
would
no,
quantify that as bad.
right.
I would for sure quantify that as bad, right?
So right.
There's not any way, like you may have the insight, but to get you the information for the insight is
Right.
just really difficult to understand.
How did we miss the mark in information,
Yeah.
not presentation?
Yeah.
That's
Right.
I guess what I'm scoping
Right.
in for today's conversation.
Okay. How do we miss them? I see. So again, because I don't want to use usage as our quantifier here for a wrong report, because again,
It could be
that
an
can
indicator though.
it can be
Like
an
if it's not
indicator. Yeah.
if it's not meeting the need of whoever requested it, they'll stop using it.
Well,
Unless that's the only place they're going to get the data. Like, yeah, that's the only report that, let's say, has your lead information, right? They're
so
going to use
so
that
this
one
was my
report.
point though earlier though. Like in a very tightly governed world, I think there are some use cases where you want it to be so tightly governed that it is the only place you get the information and you can't export it. You
Well, what?
have to go to the
Yeah,
report to get that information. Like I would kind of bring up that analogy of like, okay, if you have sales and you're trying to bonus people based
yeah,
on sales numbers, right? You don't want people going into some system and downloading a whole bunch of things. Yes, they may track their
right,
own items, but what you want is you want a story of the truth, a single source of truth. This is how much you sold. Here is your given bonus based on your sales ratio, whatever that may be, right? That is something that if they're tracking their sales numbers independently, there better be a mechanism for them to update a system, to inform someone, to change some data so that it can be corrected. Yes, you can keep track of your stuff on your own. You're not getting bonus off of your own data. You're getting bonus off this Power BI report. That's the
right.
report that we're going to use. And so I think there are use cases where that's important.
So I'm going to say wrong is driven by expectations. That is bad. So, like,
I would agree
yeah,
with that. I would 100%
and
agree with that.
I think that's where I'm going to start at least that definition, because you can have a bad report that's bad for everyone, poor design, bad functionality, but wrong is to me a lot more subjective. Obviously, you can have wrong data. That's a whole other conversation. I don't think we're talking about wrong data,
Well, I would.
right?
So if I was
Or
going to
bad,
say, I was
yeah,
going to say if it's wrong data, right? Or
right.
so I was thinking about this, right?
That's
You're
bad and wrong. Yeah. That
it's
makes a
both.
Venn diagram.
It's well, if you have a DAX formula that is adding or doing some math on something, right, and
Mhm.
it works half the time, and on other columns or data points it doesn't work at all,
Right.
Okay, now I'm thinking burgeoning like
Yeah.
now you've built a formula that only works part of the time. So that
Right.
would maybe I would put that maybe in the bucket of just a bad design. It's just not
Yeah.
you can't use it. Like it's
Right.
not useful. So I would say I like that Seth's definition of wrong of listening to what the feedback is coming back as.
Hmm.
Are they asking for features that report just is not enabled to do, or there's data that's distinctly missing?
Right.
That might have been a miss or a wrong report. It's not meeting the needs, the questions we're asking.
Right.
So I think a lot of this is starting to come back to me as bits and pieces of conversations fall into this, right?
Yeah.
I think I'd throw into the bucket here. What is wrong is that in general, we are building Power BI reports that are too general, right? And
Yes.
whether that's a byproduct of not refining the scope for the end user or being specific about what are the things we are answering with this report, because in really simplistic terms, right,
Yeah.
a lot of the Power BI reporting that we're doing is, if you're a SQL person, we're just grouping data and we're providing some filters. It's a query.
Mhm.
But it's dynamic, so it can answer more questions within that same scope, but the scope is the same.
Mhm.
You're grouping by certain things and you're still filtering with only the things we presented on the page. It's where people start like getting insights and going, "Oh, but we could do this too.
Yeah.
Oh, but what's the next thing?" And I think where myself and I'm sure like everybody else falls into this trap of like just adding more to a page or adding more to a report when we should be stopping, reflecting on like what is the intent of this specific thing? Let's build something else, a different page to be specific about answering that question.
Mhm.
Because I think where a lot of the kickback from end users always comes from is like, listen, everybody has their opinion, right? We are
Yeah.
always dealing with people, and these two things create the largest challenges in organizations, bar none.
Yep.
Do we have the one place, whether it's in the report, where it's somewhere, that is the reference point to answering like the scope question? And I don't think so. I don't think that's part of our normal like build of a report that I think is needed to
Yeah.
stop a lot of the noise that always happens that is negative about the report. Oh, it doesn't do this. Oh, like I wanted to do that. Oh, it's not doing. And it's like, well, it was never intended to. But can we reference the conversation? Can we reference the Q&A, the scope of what the original intent of that report was? And I think that's where we fall into a trap of either building the wrong thing, building something that just explodes,
Right.
and ultimately could mean we built the wrong report
So
or the report type.
yeah. So I love that because you're basically saying to me what I hear is a general report is virtuous waste. That's kind of what I'm getting out of that. Like any
I,
general report is more or less becomes virtuous waste.
well, it depends on what
Oh
you mean
man.
because our last conversation was just about how do people get access to data.
Right. Well,
Right? But if
no,
the
yeah,
scope of if the scope of the report is, guys, this is a data dump. Like you need to use the filters to get down and then you can export to your heart's content.
sure, sure,
That's
sure.
all that's all it's meant to do. But I wanted to do this. That's a different report, man.
And that should be like maybe 10% of the reports we build should be data dumps like that or general reports. But when we should be spending our time, it should be on targeted reports. But generally, they're not because generally it's a sales year to date by region, which guess what? That does not change that dynamically week over week, or at least where someone's going to create action from. One of our previous conversations too was anything that we should be reporting on should be something someone can make a decision on, therefore should be measured in some way. And sales year to date, as important as it is not really an actionable thing for a product team or a BDM in a sense on a weekly basis. Maybe every month they look at it or they're kind of checking in, but they're not really making decisions. To your point, Seth, the a wrong report is again the intention of the report if you missed the mark there, And that I think is really the crux of a wrong report. Is what's the purpose? What's the purpose of the people coming to you for that request? Are they coming to that request because they're trying to make a decision on were we successful? Did we build the wrong thing? There's a few other thoughts I have there, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because maybe people don't know what they want and that doesn't really help. But I think from what you said, the idea of building general reports in general usually is not wrong, but I think we're building too many of them, and that's what's causing a lot
I
of
think I
issues.
think another part of this conversation, right, is when somebody's asking questions in the beginning, in the upfront, um, are we having a scoped conversation to create a specific report? I think Power BI reports shine when they specifically go answer questions because we can aggregate, we can do amazing things with raw data. Or do they want to see raw data? Right? Because like
Yep.
where a lot of these conversations are leading me is I'm going to stop wasting my time building a Power BI report for people with two graphs and the table. And maybe the answer is, okay, you want to see this filtered data set. Here's a couple filters. It's a report builder report. You can dump out all the data you want and you
Yes.
can do whatever you want with it. Because is it a data request? Right? Like if you think about how we answered these
I
questions
like where this is
all the
going.
time in the past,
Yep.
Mhm.
it was SSRS reports. I wasn't, and when I was
Right.
building reporting services reports or
Yes.
report builder reports, I wasn't building fancy charts on the top of them. Like it was rare that somebody was like, can you group this up for me?" It was, "No, here's the context of your data system. Go give me this data so I can do things with it." And I think like I guess the challenge question to me is, did we just get so excited about Power BI that like we were like, dude, it's Power BI
Yes.
everything? And people are still just like, give me the data,
Give
man.
me an
I'm like, fine,
SSRS.
fine.
Well,
You want me to like? I will
Yep.
literally. Here's your reporting services report. I don't have to do 90% of the other stuff, for all of the report and go have fun. And then I can focus on the where Power BI shines, which is what I was saying before, which is you have something that's really hard to put together from the raw data. Let me go build you a very specific report that answers those questions easily for you, that you understand what I'm doing. And maybe it's like, maybe in this wrong report conversation is also the gap where we aren't bringing the end user along with us from
Mm.
raw data
Mhm.
to what we're showing them, because I think we take for granted a lot, like the power of DAX and all of the things that we can do to reshape and manipulate data to simplify in its utmost form. But when somebody just looks at that simplified thing, if they don't know what's going on, it's not meaningful to them, right? So, like we've talked about putting things on the page, but like, is there a better way to reinforce or guide people along the way of like, hey, this is there were like 5 steps along here. Here's the end result of things so that you don't have to go do those 5 steps, which you're probably doing from this report builder report.
Yes.
so I think the problem is we enjoy building Power BI reports more than people enjoy using Power BI. It's more fun to build a report than it is to use it. And I think
Mm.
we
I I
no,
disagree with that. Like we come on, man.
no,
Like the meaningful like is it fun to build Power BI reports? Yes. But like building a Power BI report for data that you want to analyze and you're
right.
really geeked about,
Yeah.
like that
Or
playing with that report after
sure,
it's built is 10 times like better. So
for
there's
us, but I'm
no.
saying for a consumer, no. Here's the point I'm trying to make. It's really easy. Like when you're trying to solve a problem in DAX, for us, it's very stimulating, and we feel like we have to do more than we need to. I think a lot of the times we've talked about this,
Yep.
but doing the bar chart and then you try to build this story, and now you have 6 visuals on the page, or even 4, but you're always trying to figure out what can you do with the data, what can you see with the data, because we feel like usually too simple is too simple. But then you think about the user who's exporting. What do you think they're exporting? Do you think they're making 4 pivot tables? No, they're probably just doing one aggregate, and that's what they're trying to get. We are building cars because they're enjoyable to do. And we're like, look, there's a wheel and a joystick, and there's 15 buttons. They're like, I just want to drive to
I need a
McDonald's
bike.
and back. Yeah, no, yeah, but like I just need to drive to work and back. Like that's
I
all I
just need to walk
want.
to the mailbox at the end of my driveway
Yeah,
and come back.
exactly.
I don't need
And
a
we're
car
like,
for that.
look, there's a touch screen and it has maps and it's voice activated because there's all these bells and whistles that we're like,
Yeah, I hear you.
yeah. So like I'm not, obviously we have our frustrations with building, but it's not like SSRS where you have to really focus on one visual. It's so easy to put a visual on. And I think for a lot of users, they don't need half the stuff because we're not answering their true question.
I I do like Seth's. I want to point like what you're
Yeah.
saying, Tommy. I think
Yeah.
dovetails very well into what Seth was saying earlier around. Is it? Do you really just need a an aggregated view of the reporting of this data system, right? Whatever data you're
Hmm.
going after, do you just need an aggregated view of access to data, or do you need insights around that information? And a lot of conversations I have with clients is, what do you want? I mean, I don't think I emphasize this enough, and I think based on this conversation, I'll probably emphasize it more. Is, do you just need aggregations? Because I really do say it's the right tool, pick the right product for the right analysis you're trying to do, right? If you want tables out, I'm pushing you to Excel and paginated reports. I am not pushing you to Power BI. It's not great at doing big tables and dynamic columns and picking all these things. So I think we've when Power BI showed up, I think at least my first thought was, throw out SSRS. It's done. We're moving on, and now we're going to do models and Power BI reports and Excel sheets. And I think that may maybe too quick, too soon to actually have that. You can't solely do Power BI and Excel. I think there's definitely a use case for this raw data extraction of, we need just access to data.
What's funny to me is a couple things, right? One is we're calling it raw data extraction, but it's it kind of is, but not, because it's
True.
grouped or filtered,
Might be
and
aggregated a
it's
little
a
bit.
tailored
Yep.
it's a tailored view of business information, which we used to call a report. I agree from the standpoint that I think we saw the power, and still there. Like, don't get me wrong, and went immediately into, I can provide all these insights for you all on the same page or in like many different forms, and you can interact and do all these dynamic things. And maybe we, like, even though we're 6 7 years into it, left the business, like it was too fast of a leap,
Yeah.
right, for business to carry along and understand. But then part of this is also, Tommy, your point, which is also resonating pretty heavily in the chat, which reinforces the point of this conversation, which is a bunch of people are saying, I like building the report more than using it. And maybe we don't understand, like the maybe us understanding the data or spending time with the end user, maybe we need to do more of that, because if we
I
don't
think
care
so.
about the data,
Yeah.
then that's a problem, man.
Right.
Like, that's a problem. And I
Well,
like, yeah, I'm guilty of it too.
yeah.
Like, when I was in consulting all over the place, like, I've said before on the podcast too, I have the technical skills and ability to build any kind of report you want. I don't need to care about the data, as long as you can tell me what you want to see. But are we challenging that now and saying, like, actually, dude or dudette, person,
Mm-hmm.
right? We need to understand the industry. We need to understand the data, because in order to produce a valuable report that's going to be used, unless somebody else is guiding you right next to you, tailoring and saying, no, okay, we need to do this. Here's why. Here's what you, nope, we want to alter this. Here's why. We want to segment this page. Here's why, right? Like, are we building something sometimes that is leaving people in the dust or isn't as useful as we think it is?
See, I see what
I
you're
like
saying,
that.
but I wouldn't say it's tied to the intimacy of the data. It's the intimacy of the user or the business. For example, I think we have to get better at asking and extracting the questions and the decision making from the users. For example, we talked about the car example, like we're building too big of a car. Well, if you ask sales, where do you want to go? Right? They're going to go to the moon. They're not going to say like to Walmart to grab this and come back. no one's going to give you that, more or less, no one's going to give you that direct answer. They're going to go, yeah, we want to go as far as possible. But usually something that what we receive, what the information we're extracting from them, we can't measure. And therefore we build general because we're trying, we like building, but we're also trying to fish for what they want. We need to do a better job rather than someone saying, I just want sales by BDM. That's all I want. That's not what they want. Like if they're telling you the bar chart that they want, they're going to look at that. I'm not going to guarantee it, but I'm going to guarantee it. That is not something they're going to look at 6 months from now because that's what they need right now for a business problem, not a
Correct.
report problem. And we need to get the question out of them. We need to ask questions in a way to start understand what they're trying to measure, and they're not just trying to measure sales. No one's just trying to measure sales. That makes no sense. Sales by itself is really not a measure. They're trying to gauge whether they should invest more in a certain region, if they have more accounts, or like, should we be building net new accounts, or should we be selling more of our current companies? Should we be investing in this product line, or are these campaigns working? But generally people will not ask those questions because I think it's a dance where we're not asking the questions in the right way. But people also don't know how to explain what they're really trying to do. And I think we need to get to a point where we're helping them say, what decisions are you trying to measure, right? Like, what's the gauge here?
It's
Because
it's also a moving target though, Tommy, too. Like I
it's a
think
moving time. Sure,
so
yeah,
I like what you stated there. Like, the questions you ask today will not be the questions you ask tomorrow. I mean, on the
right,
same report, right? So if you don't think about evolving the report, and there's a lot of chat in the comments here around, you have to be planning iterations on these reports and getting
yes,
feedback and soliciting what people are trying to use it for. Because, again, to your point, the question I'm asking right now, that report may meet that need for the short term now. But
right,
once you understand that question, you may not actually be asking that
right,
question in the future. There may be additional questions that are coming out of this, and there's no way to anticipate all of them all the time. You just
right,
can't knock it out of the park every single time. So it has to evolve the plan of what this is looking like. And so the essence of what that report was created to do might actually change. It might be
right.
different today versus 3 weeks from now.
And yeah, and I think that's part from usage too, where I'm almost challenging myself on my report development methodology, where usually like it's sandbox development, then we release it, and then we feel like we're good. But that's not usually when it's released to the audience.
Yeah.
I think there's almost a need to have a kind of subset where you do release it with accurate data, but simplified.
Yes.
And then you do a feedback with everyone who's using it to actually see what their behavior is.
So I'll
Um,
I'll second that notion right
yeah,
now, because I'm right now when I'm building reports for clients, especially clients that have not used Power BI before, I'm not I explained to them that there are these things called bookmarks, and we can swap things out and get fancy with it, but I recommend now, as your first run on this stuff, try to be as simple as possible on your first report, because you don't know what you don't know, and you haven't really understood the report capabilities. And Seth and I use this a lot of terminology. Power BI is a framework. It is not it is not the dream anything you want to dream in a report kind of thing. I mean, you can do a lot of things with it, don't get me wrong, but it's not a let's just draw up on the whiteboard every single thing you can think of on how you would render the data inside a report, because there are barriers, there are walls you're going to hit against that you just cannot do. Like, you can't type in a number onto the
right,
report page and have it use that number to calculate your values on the page. You have to build it differently than that. So there are limitations there that I think we need to consider, but I think I find more value when we can turn around a report in a half a day with some information in it that
right.
starts to get the conversation going, because people don't know what they want until they've seen it.
So I think what's interesting to me is as we're having this conversation, it, it's it's pointing back towards pre-report, but initial report build, right?
Yeah,
And what I think is a difference for me in the outcome of this conversation is we've always talked about asking the right questions, right? Understanding the business, understanding what the end user wants. We've talked about iteration, right? You start building the report, you make sure it's the type of report that they want, etc. But to me, I was not bringing the Q&A part and the definition of what we were building along for that iteration process. And I guess maybe this is where the update needs to happen related to how I engage with an end user, because what should be happening is after we have the bucket of questions and answers, like, we need to define the scope of what it is that they need, right? And I guess maybe an additional question in there is, what are the specific areas of focus that we can, need to drill into, and what are the general access needs that people have around the data that we're focusing in on? And maybe those are the delineation between, here's a report builder report, and here's some Power BI reports that are going to help in those specific focus areas. And then as we iterate and build out towards them, you're always going to be drawn with like more questions, like, oh, okay, can we add this, can we remove that, right? But is that kind of being updated in my definitions of what the scope of this report is? And I'm kind of thinking about this like from the Excel spreadsheet perspective, right? And column A is like, here's all these questions, column B is all the answers. How do we refine that? Like, what are the focus areas? What are the reports we're going to build? And um, the outcome, I think, of keeping those things together would probably be more of a prioritization of what things are the outcomes that answer the questions and answers in the specific form, what are the general data needs for data access, and then what are the things that just like we're not building right now, right? Because in
Yeah.
that respect, then it's like, then I can be clear in those reports, and I can say in an addendum or on a page, like, here's the focus area for this report, this is the stuff that it answers. Don't look for it to answer other things. If we need to look at other specific focus areas, we need to go build that. If you want general access of the data, here's this report, and go
Yes.
plug into that link.
I cannot wait to read that blog article. That's gonna be
All right.
awesome.
Well,
Noted.
No. So, but sorry.
go
Go ahead.
ahead, Tommy. You go first, and then
So,
I want, because there's some really good
but
stuff. There's really good comments in the chat too that
oh my,
that are
yeah.
talking about the same
So,
thing.
and to that point though, like it's got to be actionable. Let me give a person like, and it's from a behavior point of view too. Like, what's going to be more impactful for us? Say, my family saving a budget. My wife saying you can't spend that much at the bakery every week, or your budget's $40. Which one's measured? Right? One's a statement that's still implying the same thing, right? That you can't spend that much money. You're spending too much.
Yep.
But is that going to change my behavior? Maybe.
Well,
Maybe I won't buy as much, but I'll still, I'm not going to make an actual impact. But if she actually gives that set number, which now becomes a measurement, that's
yeah.
actually actionable.
Well, it
And then,
becomes now position and direction, right? This
right.
is one of the things I
Yes.
talk a
Yes.
lot about, is like, there's a position of where you're at and there's a direction of where you're going, right?
Right.
So in that example, right, you have $40, right? If you know you're at $38, you know your
I'm not buying
position,
another
and you know
goal. Yeah.
you're not able to get the direction. You have to stop in order to like not
And
exceed that amount.
we are not doing that in reports.
And yes, agreed. And I think there's, in general, I think more reports. It maybe in general, in general. Sorry, I'm saying in general a lot. I would say an often amount of time we're not applying what we think the goal should be towards things, and without having reports, without objectives or deliverables or things we're trying to get to or achieve. Without those things, it becomes much harder to evaluate if this number is good or bad.
Right.
Are we expecting that number? Is that not what we expected?
Right.
What kind of things are we looking for there? So I think that's really good as well, from a adding other context to the report that gives you more. But it's goalie based things are not as easy to put into reports.
No, but I think maybe we also reduce the life cycle of a report, because I think maybe our idea of what a report is, like, you set it and forget it, right? It's like, this report will live for 2 years. Maybe the life cycle of reports drastically less.
Yes.
Especially if we're building that way. So I know you got some comments you want to give some shout
Well,
outs.
I just feel like there's a lot of really good thoughts here around, do we give access to people to just the data model, or do we actually give them a report on top of the data model, or do we teach people how to build thin reports, or do we just give, or do we build it for them? And I think
You
you have
you
to.
want to talk about all aspects of Power BI now?
No. Yeah, let's talk about everything.
We haven't brought up tabular editor in a little, haven't we?
We did. We mentioned it in the beginning of the podcast.
So I feel like, so yes, that's a very wide topic of things there, but I do think like that is kind of part of the problem here, is because you have this tool that is building reports, but it's also building data cubes or data marts or however you want to spin this. And I think you have to really know your audience of like what their capabilities are. Maybe their need is not, and to your point, Seth, earlier about we just need the data or the raw data. Maybe the report is not letting them building a report for them. Maybe the right need is building a good star model with a couple measures built into it and teaching them how to thin report their way into their own data, get their own insights, explore around the information.
Yeah,
Or
I don't disagree with that, right?
yeah,
At all. I think that's probably a separate conversation all in and of itself. Like do we start using Power BI as a well? It already is, right? How do you use the platform effectively to democratize data within an organization where people are building their own stuff?
yes,
To me, this is a very report author specific question related to I'm the report author,
yes,
whether I'm general user or not, right? I
correct.
don't care. It's ultimately I'm responsible for building something of use by a lay user who's not building their own reports,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
I guess
Yeah.
to me that's the context of this conversation,
Yes,
albeit it could be the BI team, the business team, the whatever.
sure.
It I don't know if it broadens into the scope that you just outlined.
Well, I would say maybe not. Maybe I'm going a bit too big picture on some of this stuff too. With some of what is a wrong report or not a wrong
Scope.
report.
You?
Right.
No.
Scope. Like we need to keep remember like this
Yes,
conversation.
Yeah.
I
About
know, I
scope.
know, but I but when I hear these things though, I keep thinking like it's so versatile though. Like
But maybe that's why like we have the challenges that we do, and we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
Because there's 8,000 features that we all
Because
love.
you
True.
can go like
Yes,
there are so
that-
many different areas
that's what I mean.
that we can cover and we can solve for that this I think, at least in my head, was a nuanced area that I was struggling with, and at least I have a direction. Whether or not it's right or not, we'll find out. But like the refinement of how do I make sure that
Mm-hmm.
what I'm delivering I understand and the end user understands, and there's somewhere else they're gonna go make a request, or they're you know what I'm saying? Like
Yep.
I've
Yeah.
refined the output.
Yep.
Well, because I think a lot of times, and I think I really need to start doing this more, but we think of the report as the end, it's the solution, but it shouldn't be, right?
Other
It should be
parts to the solution. And that's what.
it should
Yes,
be a
that's kind of where I
means
was
to
going.
the end,
Yeah.
right? So if you have a report, and I really want to have this statement for all my reports, that any consumers say this report has helped us as measured by X in the report,
Ooh, that's a good way. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So, and these are
This
goes
report helps
back
me
to
measure whatever that thing
yeah,
is.
as measured by like so like
Yep.
we've been successful, or this report's made me do this as measured by
Yep.
X, Y, and Z. So, and it could be total sales, but it's in the context of that question, or the
Yeah.
context of the problem, or the decision, as you said, like direction.
Yeah.
And I think we say we built the report, there's your solution. No, 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 no. Did we know what the actual problem was? So how is this that engine, or yeah, how is this the means to that end? And if you
Yeah.
can't name an end for that report, like the actual business end, that report has no reason to exist. And again, a lot of this is harder than said. There aren't there like 4 types of reports. There's like analytical, operational, ad hoc. I remember hearing this before, but there's like types of reports.
I'd
Sorry,
go.
I'm going.
Those all
Sorry, I
sound
think I
reasonable to
have
me.
I have some elephants upstairs apparently, so
No, it's fine. We
apologize
can't hear
for
too
yeah.
bad.
But I think that if I could get the majority of my reports where the consumer can have a statement that says, this report helps as measured by, then I think that's going to make we're building the right reports. So that was another tangent, but
No, I like your little statement there. This report helps me measure this, right?
yeah,
And I think
as measured by,
yeah.
I
yeah,
think
or
I think I agree, right? So if I'm gonna make alterations in my report build process, one thing I am gonna also add is that end thing in the report that tells the business user the context. Because I cannot tell you how many conversations I have around all types of reports, whether it's internal or external, where somebody comes in and says, this isn't doing what I want, or this isn't doing what a customer needs, or whatever. And it's like, well, what are the customer needs compared to the specific thing that this report should be doing? Is your complaint in context of that? Then don't tell me the report's
Right.
wrong. We need to go build something else to meet that need.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the generalization I think that's happening on top of targeted or scoped reports that we can be better about.
And
I
if
I think
yeah,
that's right. I think that's very right, Seth, and I think it's a very good point. I have had a number of conversations come back and say, um, "This report's wrong," or "This is not like." There is something else to say here that we've worked so hard on these reports and no one's using them, or something along those lines. That story
Right.
has been I've heard that
right,
before, and so you go back and I say, "Well, who decided what reports we were building?" And maybe we didn't and maybe
Right.
that person didn't really understand what the end user or the
yeah.
customer or whatever is going to really need
Oh my God.
inside their report. So I think it and then for me sometimes the blame comes down to like, well, the report's wrong. The report needs to be updated. We've got to make it look better. We've got to add these extra bells and whistles to it. And my argument would be is adding more bells and whistles, adding the extra flair that we think we need to get people to use a report is not really what we're looking for. What we're really looking for is why are we here? What
Right.
Right.
what this report
Yes.
helps me measure this as of this
Right.
dimension. Like
So
Right.
there's a significant and 100%. Like I
yeah.
cannot tell you how many times I've been in conversations where
Mhm.
it's a new group of people, it's the same conversation,
Yep.
and the outcome of that conversation is three different ways.
Mhm.
Why? Because those three conversations don't start with the scope.
Yes.
They don't
Well,
start with what questions did we ask? Why did we answer them the way we did? Did we just miss the output? Right? Did we miss answering it in the right way?
Yep.
Or did we ask the wrong questions completely because
Totally.
our internal
yeah.
users or customers don't care about those
Right.
questions?
Correct.
Right?
Eh,
But the problem is we're not defining that or resting our like we're not we're not saying here's the starting point. So when you open this report, go back to the starting point and everybody should have the conversation from this starting point. Like and this is where you get into that
ye-
vicious business circle where it's like the next person comes in with the great idea, right? Like,
yeah.
Mhm.
oh, what our
Yeah.
customers really need is this. And
This.
then they define the same questions, right? They just slightly modified the output.
Yep.
Or they come in
Yeah.
with a completely different set of questions,
Yep.
which the reports were never meant to answer.
Right. And this kind of goes back. Oh my gosh, this is awesome
Tommy's
because
literally gonna explode right now. I can see him. He's literally like he's like shaking in his chair right now because he is so excited to say something. Go ahead, Tommy.
I think I forgot it.
Oh no.
No,
Seth almost got us coffee.
That's funny.
no. Okay, so what I believe I was going to say is this goes back to the idea of the means to an end because we think, oh, well, the reason why they're confused is because there's no reference page and there's no video of how to use it. But again, it's not solving the context, like the actual problem. Go back to one of our conversations that are reports too busy, right? Like again, if I downloaded a chemistry app on my phone, I am going to be very confused because I'm not going to know what to use it for.
Yep.
I guarantee you, if we actually were building these very targeted decision measured reports, people will figure it out pretty easily. But they don't know why to use that report or why to use the drill through. That has no purpose for them. You know what I mean? It's a feature, but it's not a feature that's leading to another action. Drill through in itself should not be the end. It's a means to something they should be trying to do. And I guarantee you, if you actually have that solution or all the features relate to something they are trying to achieve outside of the report, they'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I can guarantee it. Just like again, I could download any cookbook app or any recipe app, and I'm gonna figure it out pretty quickly. Do you know why? Because like, oh, what am I gonna use it for? I'm not using it so I can look at an app. I'm going to go, I want to find out this recipe. Okay, let me look for search. Okay, then I'll look at search. But Right, but like,
Mhm.
the idea is like I already have the intention I'm going to do. The app itself is not solving the problem. Is
Yes.
driving me to that.
Yes.
And I think we think there's too many features. Well, no, could have the right amount of features, but there's none of those features lead to an action. So
Man, the chat is on fire today. There's some funny stuff going on in the chat.
We know because you've been reading it
I've
as
been reading
opposed
it
to
and I'm
talking to
laughing
us.
on the oh my gosh, it's so good. But I man, there are Tommy, I think you're spot on. I think that these data questions we're asking, man, someone and
What
thank
specifically did you like
yeah,
about
yeah.
Tommy's?
Please tell me.
well there's now like pasta references coming in here, and I thought Tommy's gonna love the pasta references inside the chat window. So
I,
Uh, well,
yeah,
but I think we bring this full circle where we start talking about like all of these pieces, right? I mean, and Alex Powers was like, "Hey, what if we had a dashboard area where we could measure and put all these things together, like as if it was a quote unquote goal applied, and that's bringing it full circle for us." But yeah, I think in general, though, I feel like a lot of what we're doing now is we're highlighting issues that were maybe there all along, but the tooling is enabling these questions or these uh conflicts maybe to come closer to what the business side is actually thinking about. And man, I just really like this tooling. I like thinking about these kind of things. These are the challenges and stuff that we had to work our way through to be able to be to ask these deeper questions to figure out what's going on here, because I think these were always existing, but maybe people were solving them on their own and taking snippets of data and solving them their own little way. And interesting.
It's way more entertaining than incremental refresh. I'll tell you that.
Oh, whoa.
I'm saying it's also fun.
Wait,
But I'm
wait till the end of February where you can listen to all my the day before when I prepare my presentation around incremental refresh
it'll be
for
better than
for our
mine.
user group.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think as a final point where I'm
Yeah.
kind of finalizing like the other thing I would add to my process, which would be depending on how large the report usage could potentially be. It almost feels like each report may need a guide, right? In the same way that I have conversations or like consulting, like
Yep.
you're leading people, you're building, you're answering the right scope. Like we're doing all these things to build this product. Are we doing all the things we need to successfully integrate that product into the business? And a lot of like, if you think about why companies hire consultants or rely on their experts,
Yep.
it's because they have a challenging problem to solve. And we, as business intelligence folks or people who deal with Power BI, are typically the people that are solving those problems. So we solve it, but then we don't bring everybody else along for the ride. And
Agreed.
maybe that's the
Right.
secondary part with some of these reports that you need to like think about it in the reverse aspect, much in the same way with like Power BI itself, right? How many times, like in the beginning, did we have people asking us and still asking us, right? Where's the training for the end user? Like, how does an end user
Yep.
interact with Power BI?
Yep. Agreed.
And maybe that needs to be part of our at least reference point in saying, like, great, we built this awesome thing, but did we build the opposite direction, like the path towards
Mhm.
that thing, so everybody understands what we built?
Agree.
Yeah, my closing comment. I do have a question to at least have some solution to the end of all these problems. But I think my kind of conclusion here is I don't. The more and more I think about it, I think from this conversation says so too. Is it has nothing to do with the features or the lack of features or information panels. It's about the features in the report must lead to some action or decision that someone's trying to get to. The
Mhm.
report should be that bridge to what they're trying to do. It can't be the end of the bridge. And I think that's when a report becomes confusing or wrong, is when someone realizes that's the end of the rainbow, so to speak, is the report. A drill through, a button should be the bridge to get to where they're trying to go. And if we
That,
can't say that and they can't say that, it's the wrong report.
so what you get here on the Explicit Measures podcast, where we give you tips from the real world, is solving the people problem, right? A
This is
lot
a
of
Yeah.
people.
this
This
is
is a people
about
problem
it's a
too.
people problem. It's
It's
the
absolutely true.
implementation. It's the implementation aspects of things that um, you're only going to find here on the Explicit Measures
Well,
podcast.
sorry, the last bit, like, it doesn't matter if you clicked on a report and like 5 pop-ups told you what to do in the report. If none of those apply to you, like,
Right.
it's still confusing. So my solution question for you, or however you want to phrase it, is we've talked obviously a lot about the things that are wrong. Where do we go from here? Like, what can we start doing either to exist in reports or start implementing? Because we got to solve this.
Apparently I got a blog article coming on
You
that.
Yeah.
absolutely have one, and I can't wait to read it for my own self. but like, where do we go from here? We've talked about all these things. What can we do? I mean, there's got to be something. Something has to change. That's what I'm getting from this. Something has to change in our process and how we build reports. What can we start doing to begin that change?
Do you want me to reiterate what I think I'm going to start changing? Because this is what I said like
What's the
halfway
first
through,
step?
right?
Tell
About
me
the
the
30-minute
first
mark
step.
when my brain kicks in
Yeah,
is
yeah,
usually
exactly. That's when.
when my one idea
Okay.
comes through. Here's the things I'm going to change, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to change my QA process, right? So that my questions and answers go along for the ride in iteration. So that as I'm iterating the report build with the end
Right.
users, I'm also iterating what data is going to show and what's not going to show, and kind of keep track of what's in scope and what's out of scope. The other thing I'm going to introduce is a general scope of like what general data access needs might you have alongside this that we should probably build in a report builder report so that you can go suck some data down, if you want to, so you're not
That's such a good idea.
requiring my scoped report to do that.
Yep.
And then so that refines my
That's
conversation, right? And gives me specific and general access. It prioritizes the focus areas that are the problem. And then ultimately in the report itself, we need to bring forward the lowest common denominator, ultimately the lay person. So depending on the report, we need to clearly define somewhere in the report what the scope of that report is, or potentially add in, further information, maybe examples, maybe a link to a video, maybe something that's going to guide an end user into how they can utilize the report, because nothing goes further. We do it all the time on Power BI Tips, right?
Mhm.
Like you guys just built 6 videos. Why? Because those 5-minute videos are so easy for somebody to go, oh, duh, that's how you do that. Oh, this is the question that it answers. So if you built a video for all your reports and just said, here's the 5 questions that this report answers, here's how you go get that answer in this report,
Mhm.
you unlock that report for the end user. And they can go, this is useful to me, or this is not useful for me,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And then you
Yeah.
could say, hey, by the way, at the end of this video, I'll tell you about the general access report that has all of these columns. If you don't see a column you'd like, I have no problem adding another one.
Right. Yes.
I love the idea of the general access, the golden corral of reporting. But
Golden corral. Love
but
it.
just but like the idea of a matrix
All you
of
can eat, man.
all you can, yeah.
Mhm.
But like having that general ledger of all you want your year to date information, it's all in this one report. But then kind of creating a matrix, so to speak, of have we met the needs of each of these teams in these ways. But I love that. Mike, for you, what's the first step? What are our first
So
steps here
I've been
to
trying to
start?
doodle out. I mean, I try and take copious notes of what all you guys are saying because there's a lot of really relevant things here, and I have like our little wrap up here of suggestions. You've already touched on some of them that I think are very relevant. One that I take away for me that I think is very relevant has been: is this data? Do you just need the raw data? Are you looking for access to data, or are you looking for insights and action on top of the data? I think that helps you decide whether or not you're building a paginated report or if you're building a Power BI report. I think that's something that teased out very well. I would firmly believe, and I think this works very well, especially I've done this a lot in consulting, is really try and pick out like what are the actions you need to take on this report, write them down. What are the insights you're looking to do or achieve within this report? And don't bloat the report. Don't add a whole bunch of extra things in there. Like it may be simple, right? Um, embrace the process is what I would call this next part,
Mhm.
right? Embracing the process means, from Kevin in the chat, iterate on it, right? You may start a report, it may be initially wrong, but then iterate on it, make it less wrong, and then hopefully iterate it on again and make it correct. So I think there's this process of, you may not get it right the first time out of the gate. That's fine, but don't spend a whole lot of extra work making bookmarks and buttons and all the bells and whistles if you know you're gonna have to go back and kind of revamp this and get this closer to what the end user would consume. And then my last point, I think I'll go in here is just spending more time with users to explain data. I think this is an understated value proposition for when you've built the report. If you spend a week on a report and you can't put together a 10-minute video to how to explain it, I think that might be a miss. I think you should prioritize uh, maybe my perception on this at a high level. We love data. We're great at engineering the data. I've seen a lot of good professionals, MVPs, say, tell me, like, we're great at building the data model and putting all the data pieces together. We fall apart on the presentation layer of some of this. And so while I think there's a couple presentation layers on this, right? You definitely have to have a solid data model. You definitely need to have it doesn't have to be, I mean, I think it should look good, but it should also be very functional for what the users are going to try to action on top of. And then I think you have to have another layer of this is that I haven't communicated very well or clearly is you need really like a training piece of this, right? There really needs to be some very educated pieces around why this is here and what we're trying to do with it. Because I think that closes off some of these questions around like, well, I want the report to do this. Well, that's not what we designed the report to do because
Right.
here's the training documentation that shows you
Yeah.
this was trying to tell you X. What you're asking for is something totally different, and that doesn't fit with what we already built. Now, if you need that,
I love it.
that might be another page, or if you need that, that might be another report on top of our data model. Great. But I think when you start scoping out what you're trying to accomplish, I think it helps adjust the expectations on the other side of it to this report won't answer every question, and it's not intended to answer every question. It was designed with intent, and your intent is falling outside of that designed realm of what you're building.
Mhm.
Anyways, just a lot of really good.
That's really good.
I like there's
Intentional pinpoint,
Yeah.
rather than trying to expand the audience.
I like that.
This is awesome.
Well,
This is,
and half that is right is bringing other people along for the ride.
Yes.
Right. Like if
Yes.
you're asking questions about my report that have nothing to do with the report,
Yep.
go read this first.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't align, stop asking your question.
Yeah.
I'm dead serious.
Yeah.
I know. That's why I'm laughing.
Well, but to your point though, like that's another like if it doesn't answer that question, and that's what we really need is that's the burning question we need to answer this week or this month or whatever the customer needs. Fine, let's figure out how to answer that question. And if it doesn't fit the context of this report, let's build something else that answers that
Right.
kind of question. I think
Right.
that's I think the observation. I don't know who said it. I think it was Tommy or it was Seth. Anyone else other than me? It wasn't me.
Seth.
It's probably Seth. The reports are too broad. There's too much general observations inside these reports, and they need to be more specific and more narrowed. And I think that is probably a good insight to have. All right. Whew. Well, with that, this has been a fun conversation. I enjoy this as always. I'm learning a ton from you guys, the chat as well. Thank you guys very much for participating. Our only ask is today, if you enjoyed this conversation, if you enjoyed what we were talking about here, please go ahead and share it. We really want to encourage you to let someone else know you found some value, or Mike has a bunch of dumb ideas and you should listen to him and laugh at them, or whatever makes your Tuesday morning a little bit more enjoyable. Thank you all very much. And Tommy, where can you find the podcast if you're not watching today live?
If you're not watching, you can find on Apple and Spotify. I have to really think about that one sometimes. You can watch on Apple and anywhere you can listen to a podcast. You can listen to the Explicit Measures podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you like to. I like Overcast. Leave a rating. It really helps us out a lot, and I really appreciate just giving us a solid 5 stars. We'll give away some swag. We're not going to bribe. If you're listening and you want to join the conversation, you're hearing about this chat, and Mike's going to mention you online on a podcast. Join the conversation. Make Mike laugh. And,
Dude, I was dying today. I'm sorry, I could not keep it together.
Yeah, and you can watch on YouTube and LinkedIn and follow Power BI Tips. The last thing I'll say from the chat is someone said there's something as creepy pasta. I'll argue that, saying if it's creepy, it's not pasta. So,
oh boy, here we go. That's another episode all in of itself. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you on Thursday.